Oh, the tariffs are on, everything's down. Oh, you know what? Let's buy it all while it's down because I just have a feeling that he's going to reverse the tariff thing. And yeah, they're in the government. This is insider
I'm
trading.
going straight to the top, Just put the stack on the clock. I am Rihanna's a shot. I'm going straight to the top.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Mike here with the Sports and the Real podcast, coming at you once again. Thanks for joining us for another few minutes to talk about some real stuff. Not a sports conversation this time. Um, as I always talk about on this channel, whenever I get a chance, we talk a lot of sports, but whenever I get a chance, I do want to take some time to educate a little bit, leave you guys hopefully better than what you came in with after the few minutes you spent with me. So today I have a special guest. We're going to continue on our series of talking money and wealth and making money and investing and all that good stuff, financial wellness. So I have a special guest, Mr. Rick Webster, who is experienced in quite a bit of facets as it relates to finances and financial wellness and things like that. So we'll chop it up for a few minutes, and you guys sit back, sit tight, take notes if you have to, play it back if you need to. Tell a friend also, to come join in. Um, Check out the website sportsandthereal.tv. Like and subscribe as always. Leave a comment. Let me know what's going on. But let's get into it. Let's get into the conversation. Rick, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me here. It's an honor. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into it. So when we, caught up and chatted a couple of weeks back, you talked about, you know, you do a lot of work in financial literacy, but specifically focusing on ADHD individuals suffering from ADHD. And I hadn't heard of anything like that of financial literacy specific to that population. So, wanted to ask you to share with us what drove you to working with that group. What led you there? Um, is it some experience that you had with someone or personally yourself? What led you to actually, working specifically with ADHD folks and financial literacy?
Well, there was a long cascade of things that happened, but if I was to pick the big pivotal moments, I think number one, I was diagnosed with ADHD about at the age of 46. I'm 73 now. So that was a diagnosis. I learned about it a couple of years before that, but my life had fallen apart. So I was unable to, pursue that, although I did get that put back together. So that was a big issue. And as my life fell apart from the investment world, when I put things back on, when the lights kind of came back on, it's pretty traumatic to have your whole world fall apart on you. Um, I came up with some new kind of global parameters, I'll call them, for myself. And one of them was I was in the financial world. I didn't want to work for just a paycheck ever again. There's got to be more to life than that. I mean, I've been sucked into that idea, as probably the majority of people are. And I just realized I'm not my stuff. I am not my stuff. And the fact that everything fell apart and I kind of lost all my stuff and a ton of things, including home to live in and all that, I survived. I survived just fine with some traumatic stuff, of course. So then when I was putting my things back together, I said, what can I use? I'm not a rocket scientist. I don't know. I can't build a bridge, but I do understand financing. I know real estate. I know financing. I know joint venturing. I know, lease options. I know all kinds of things about real estate that a lot of people don't have. They may have an academic knowledge, but I have a on the ground learned by experience knowledge, including academic, on top of that, I suppose. So when I'm trying to put things back together, I said, well, I'm never going to go be a landlord again. I don't have to go into it, but I will never do that again. Um, Not that it wasn't profitable. It was very profitable, but um, I didn't want to do that. I realized I could take my skills and I could turn tenants into owners. And that's the number one difference between the haves and have-nots in this country, is being a tenant versus an owner by a factor of 35 to 1, and that gap is widening. Tenants are flatlined in their net worth, and people that have equity, it just keeps going up. So I I formed RenaFi actually. Well, actually, I formed a company called Socially Conscious Investments to help turn people. I was looking for an area of the country, and we looked at several cities. We picked Detroit; it seemed like the place to be at that time, and we turned 25 families that would have not been able to buy a home into homeowners. And then we had used up our pot full of money, and I thought we could create a secondary market easily. Turns out nobody wants a secondary market the size of us. We couldn't play in that pool, right? We didn't have $100 million worth of loans to sell every couple months, like say JP Morgan Chase or something. So I
Mhm.
was unable to bridge that. And then there were a couple more iterations, and then it came to um, what are we doing? We were getting letters of gratitude from people who said we changed their lives with the financial information. We couldn't keep buying houses because we didn't have the cash anymore, and we couldn't sell the loans fast enough to generate the cash. So we said, well, we'll teach people, and then they can go do their own thing. They can buy their own house. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but I'm one of those people that you could put down in the city with a few $1,000s and I could buy a house. I'm tired of people saying they can't buy a home. That just really rattles me. That you absolutely can. But what I would say is that I wanted to do it in a as ethical a way as possible. And so now what we do is we train people in money, and we didn't start with the ADHD community. We started, pre-COVID with a mortgage company, be part of their loss mitigation department, and labor union, another reason. And and then COVID came along and tanked both of those. And as an entrepreneur, I teach that a little bit too. You got to be able to pivot. When someone moves your cheese, right, you got to be able to do something about it. Um, so we figured out that people were happy with the knowledge we were giving them, and so that's where RenaFi moved into the ADHD community, because you got to look for where your target audience is, and 61% of us have financial problems. I said, well, that's a pretty healthy percentage. If we want to look where people need the help, neurodiverse communities are a big part of it.
So
That's
what
how I
what
got started.
causes yeah, so let me ask this, what causes those financial problems in your mind? Because I did quick research on it, didn't go into much detail. But what I saw in terms of like financial literacy and recommendations was stuff that you would recommend to like the average person, right? Like tracking, your expenses, budgeting, like automating your finances, like limiting credit card use. Like these things to me sound like the average person. Like I would take that recommendation. I need those recommendations. What makes it so hard for ADHD people?
It's a really good question, and I wish more answered it. But um, the the difference is the ADHD. And so if you give people the same advice that you'd give a neurotypical person, it probably isn't going to work. It's just going to be another failure in an ADHD life. You you can't tell them to get a better daytimer and life will be good. Right? They know that. They know if I could use a daytimer properly, my life would be a little bit more organized. They know that if I could put money aside every month, I would be better off. They know all these things, and when you keep getting that same kind of advice, it's very pejorative. It's insulting, and it makes you feel badly. Because, well, yeah, I'm not a stupid person. I know that. Why can't I do it? And when you keep getting that same advice, you just feel worse about yourself. You feel shame. You look back and you say, well, all these things were my fault, which they kind of were in a way, but not because of what people think. They weren't your fault because you were lazy or irresponsible. They were your fault because you didn't know about the ADHD that's blindsiding you. ADHD is a physical difference in the brain. It's not made up. People have been talking about this since Socrates, right? And probably earlier than that, but it's not made up. It's a very real thing. It's not caused by our society, and it's not caused by Facebook or anything else. There's a neurological difference in the brain, primarily in the prefrontal cortex, having to do with executive functions. The executive functions are the conductor of the orchestra, so to speak, right? You got all these different parts of your brain working. The executive function brings it all together and says, okay, you got this skill and you got that discipline and you got all these things, bring it all together and get something done. And for people with ADHD, it's like driving a car with three wheels, right? You say, oh, 75% of you is there. Well, it doesn't matter. You got to have the whole thing for it to work. And people with ADHD that's not remediated, they're not taking steps to deal with it, They're literally like the person driving the car with three wheels. It is not going to work out well. No matter how good intentions they have, no matter how many new daytimers they buy, no matter how many times they beat themselves up because, oh, I'm going to do it better next time. That's nothing. It doesn't work. If anything, it gets in the way and makes it worse.
I'm gonna tell you as you talk, I'm wondering like, do I have ADHD? Because like I feel like I struggle with all these things, right? I've struggled, as most people do, managing a budget for a long time. Like I make impulse purchases still, things like that, right? So that's why I said like I feel like the average person can relate to this as well, even though they haven't been formally diagnosed with ADHD. Like
No doubt.
what specific tools then or guidelines do you offer to these individuals who, like you said, like they're gonna keep going back and they're gonna keep struggling because for whatever reason, right, in the brain, something's off there. um how do you fix that then, because the brain isn't fixed, is it? The brain isn't ever fixed.
Yeah. So first of all, it's lifelong. You don't grow out of it. That's
Yeah.
another myth. That's we used to think, well, only boys have it and girls don't have it, and they grow out of it. Boys grow out of it. But you don't. You can develop good coping skills, and so it's not tanking your life in some way. You can find yourself in a great career and have a great romantic mate. You can have all these things that are matched to you, and then the ADHD won't be so bad in that respect. But it does not go away. It's like having five fingers. Barring some accident, I'm going to have five fingers my whole life, right? I need to figure out how to live my life with five fingers. That's how it works, and we do obviously, but we have to also figure out what we can do. I could never have been able to be an NBA player. I'm not 7 feet tall, and I don't have the coordination, the talent, and all that, right? So no matter how well I was coached, I would not be able to do that particular thing. But there's other things that I can do really well, and I've navigated my life to be in those areas that I do the best at. And I think that's a big thing for ADHD people. I I coach people. One of my biggest demographics, um, and there's reasons why these people gravitate to me, but it's attorneys. It's attorneys that are 35 on
Really?
the young end, but typically 45 to 50 years old, and they fell into the career. It sounds funny. How do you fall into a career that takes so much education? Well, you do.
Seriously?
I can tell you, you fall into. I'll explain that in a minute, but let's. They fell into the career, and it has no meaning and purpose. But now they're making $250,000 a year or whatever they're making, depending on what part of the country you're living in. And that may be a lot of money, may not be. They've got a mortgage. They got kids getting ready to go to college. They're trapped, and yet
Mhm.
they're in a job. One of the nicest guys I know, he's an attorney, works for the government in California, and all day long he works in what I imagine is a windowless room, pushing conflict papers around all day long. That's all he does. He answers objections, and he's fighting with people on paper all day long. That's all he does, day in and day out. He hates it. This is a really nice guy, right? So he's actually building another business now so he can get out of that. But he's got these golden handcuffs, right? How can he leave the job that's putting food on the table, paying the mortgage, and getting ready to put his kids in college? Um, the way you fall into a career like that is you go to college, and high school kids fall into college, right? They just go there because their parents had to go there, right?
That's
That's
what
how
that's what the, that's what we're taught though, right? Is the path.
you're taught. It's a path, yes. And only like 15 or 20% of the people who graduate from undergraduate end up working in the field they grow in, but that they graduate in. But it's not about that. It's really about learning how to think. It's about critical thinking, which is why I would definitely push college above, maybe not instead of, but alongside of trade schools and things. Because in trade school, they don't teach you how to think; they teach you how to frame a house, or
Right.
lay
How to
pipes and
do.
things.
How
Yeah.
to do.
So they go through college. And they still don't know what they're going to do. They're 22 years old, as far as I'm concerned. They're still kids, right? Their brain's not even fully developed yet, right? In some ways. And again, the parents, the family says, well, what are you going to do now? I don't know. I can go to work somewhere, but nothing's paying me anything. I think I'm a smart guy. I think I'll go to graduate school. So they take the LSAT or medical school stuff they want. They take the LSAT for law school. They test well. They get into law school. They still don't know why they're there. They've seen some TV shows that make it look really glamorous, but some tiny fraction of them end up in the courtroom. Most of them end up pushing papers in a windowless room, and they hate it. And by this, if they've done that for 5 or 10 years, it's just literally killing them in some. So that's And that's a problem for ADHD people too. We don't live as proactively as would be good for us. We go from lily pad to lily pad, the exciting new shiny new penny thing, and we just keep starting over with new ideas, new ideas, new ideas. I've met so many people. One I'm thinking of in particular thinks this veritable fountain of new ideas he has every single day. He thinks it's his strength, and I look at it and I told him it's not your strength. You have new ideas. You drop them the next day, the next week. You can't
Why do
pursue
I feel like
something.
you're talking about me?
Yeah,
Why do I feel like you're exposing me right now? My wife says it all the time. You have all these ideas, but I do implement things. At least I try to implement things. So I'm not just having ideas and not doing anything. I actually work on my ideas, right? So I will say that.
yeah,
But getting back to ADHD folks, so how do you so you mentioned that, again, they're missing something. It's something that they're never gonna get back, right? Um, how do you then get them to ever, I'll use the term in quotes, succeed, right? So you do all this coaching. What stops them from just reverting back forever, right? What do you put in place so that ADHD people can actually start living a life of success where they can actually, take action and stick to those actions, as you would, we'll say a normal person, in quotes.
yeah. It's a combination of things. I don't want to be too reductive about it. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's the number one foundational thing is meaning and purpose. Why? Why are you getting up in the morning? Is there a point to your life? I mean, are you doing something that you feel good about? Are you helping someone that you care about? What is it in your life that you're doing that means something to you? And if you can't figure that out, probably need to jump into another lane somewhere and do something different, right? So um, that's underlies it. What are your values? And so I encourage people to take um, self-report assessments because they're free and easy and they're informative, like via character.org. You can take there and it'll give you a pretty good outline of what your values are if you take it honestly. And it's funny that the honesty thing is funny because when I look at that, if honesty is in the top five, I know they game the system because honesty is not in anybody's top five. It might be in somebody's. That's not to say honesty is not important, but maybe compassion and love and learning,
Mm-hmm.
maybe those things belong higher than that. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
when someone says, "Do I look nice in this dress?" you're going to say, "Oh yeah, you look great," even though you don't think so, right? You're
Right.
not being honest, but you have a higher value. You don't want to get in trouble, right? So you say that. So, uh, so I think that's values. And then I would encourage someone to take the Myers-Briggs, which the free version is at 16personalities.com.
I took that
Myers-Briggs
before.
assessment. And then the It's Your Yale. It's got a whole lot of skills and assessment things. So you can figure out what you're good at, what you have the skills for. If you think of those three things as a Venn diagram, your values and your personality and your skills, the overlap, that's your sweet spot. When you're doing something that you feel really good about, like I love to renovate houses, right? I feel great. I'm going to renovate this house. I love to fix things. That's part of my value system. I like working with my hands and I don't really want to have to be talking to people all the time. So that fits in my personality. Um, and it's within my skill set. So I can fix that house up. I can sell it to an owner occupied family. And I feel really good about my life when I do that. And I make good money at it when I do it. So I don't do that anymore, but I did that for quite some long time. Um, so that's just kind of an example. The attorney starting another business that's more aligned with what he likes in his life. And I'm not going to say a whole lot about it because I don't want people look him up and figure out who he is. Privacy thing, but he's moving away from it. And the good thing about law school, in case there's somebody out there listening, is law school is a tremendous general education. It teaches you how to think, and you can use that skill in a lot of different places. Um, as opposed to, I suppose, if you were trained as a high level radiologist, I'm not sure what else you do with that if you don't like it anymore. I mean, kind of starting over. That
Hmm.
not that I know what that
Yeah.
career is like, but law law school is it's not a bad place to have come from. Um, But you don't need that level of education either. I mean, look at the big companies in the world like Apple and stuff. They weren't started, they were started by very, very smart people. But these are not people with deep PhD level educations, right? As a matter of fact, another thing about ADHD, we have this really wide peripheral view. We see everything going on the sidelines, and that's part of the problem, right? We're not focused in on the thing in front of us because there's a squirrel on the neighbor's roof, and suddenly, oh, I got to go take a picture of that, right? So we see all this weird stuff on the sides. Well, that's what it takes to be the CEO of a company. You need to see the broad picture. You can hire the PhD person to do the deep dive in the one thing that you need done. You can hire a really good coder to program out your AI agents or whatever you're going to use for your business. You can hire that done. You've got to see, if you're a company owner, the big picture, how all the pieces fit together. And ADHD people are really well suited to that big picture, which is why we're way overrepresented in company ownership.
Really? So see, now you're so on one end, ADHD folks struggle financially, financial literacy, we'll say. But on the other hand, they're overrepresented at like what business ownership and like CEO levels, you think?
Yeah, CEO levels of small companies, not one person companies. That's not a business, but 5, 6, 7, 8 people
Mm-hmm.
companies, small contracting companies,
Mm-hmm.
attorney firms, real estate companies of all sorts. Yeah, coaches form their own
Really?
collective of people. Yeah, that's one of the things we do well because we see this big picture. We may not be down in the weeds. We may not be the expert in the weeds. In fact, that's a big part of my coaching process too, is to say, like for me, I use AI to analyze my company, and it flat out told me nicely, because it's programmed to be nice. It said, get out of operations, hire somebody, give them complete control of your company. You'll do better, right? You keep screwing that up. You have visions, you come up with new things to do, but once they're done, it's like I could design a clock for you, but if you ask me to maintain it, it's not going to work for very long, right? So I can get something started, and then I need to hand it to someone, which is really hard to do because no one can do it as well as I can do it at first, right? Of course, they're going to learn and eventually do it better than I was doing it. But I have this, oh, no, 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 you can't do it that way. Let me send that letter out for you instead. And suddenly I'm breaking my own system.
What? I feel like you're diagnosing me right now. I'm serious. Like everything you've mentioned is like it's my character trait. Like I start things, I create things. I'm not great, nor do I really want to sit around and run something day to day. I like, I like new things. I like creating. But once it's created, and up and running, I don't think I really care for the day to day grind of making it work.
Right.
Like I feel like I fall in line with what you're talking about with ADHD folks.
Yeah. So, so you asked me for what's different. And most of this advice will work for everybody because we all have the same financial world to live in. Money is basically math, right? So we're working with the same math that everybody else is working with. But what we're not working with is the same grit in some way, conscientiousness. We're not working with the same focus on things we're not interested in. We're not working with the same, stick to itiveness in some ways. We're often either we go to the extremes. Either we think we know it all, or we don't think we know anything,
Uh-huh.
right? And we can sometimes we actually almost inexplicably we flip back and forth between those two things. We're going along really good, and then realize we're, on the beginning of the Dunning-Kruger curve. If you've seen that, Mount Stupid versus the Valley of Despair, we flip back and forth between those things, and we're very poor self-observers sometimes. So um, one of the things that I would suggest that people do, more than suggest, it's fairly foundational. We Our thinking comes in two types in broad strokes. We have our outcome-based thinking, and we have our doing thinking, right? So our outcome, that's their CEO type. what do I want to do? What's my big vision for the future? How am I going to accomplish it? I'm making all these plans, right? And sometimes we get stuck in those, but we need to do that separately from the doing. Because when you try to plan while you're doing, you're not going to do, right? You may, well, some people don't plan and they just do, but most of us will go back to the planning because you get a lot of, you know, not endorphins. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, we get the feel good happiness thing. So we get the good chemicals going on. And when we get in the tedious dull work that's slow, we don't like that. Then we start feeling anxiety and then we go off course.
Oh.
So what I would suggest is planning the night before. If you plan your day the night before, in the evening, I am the CEO of my life. I am saying these are the things that are important to do. And during the day, I'm the worker bee of my life. I don't have the authority to not do the plan. I've been hired to do the plan. So my CEO self, when it's
Hmm.
emotionally farther away from things, says, here's what I think would be best for you to do tomorrow. And then tomorrow I get my worksheet out and okay, that's it. I have to execute on that. And if I don't like something, I can jot it down in the margins of the plan and then take it up with my CEO self tonight. But I don't have the authority to just not do it. Think about if you were hired to work at Walmart, right? The worst employer in the country, probably. But anyway, you were hired at Walmart and they wanted you to run the register. Well, you don't get to go sweep the floor. You got to do the register because that's what
Hmm.
that's the piece, that's the cog they needed you to be. They got other people to do the floor. They got other people doing different things. They hired you for that particular job. So when you do your outcome based thinking, you say, okay, I'm hiring you for tomorrow to do these three things, not something else, those three things. And that's hard for people with ADHD to do. So we start really slow, really, really slow, and just start layering in some things. We don't try to make huge changes all at once.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what you typically hear about ADHD folks. It's like, they're kind of all over the place. They can't focus and they're scatterbrained. And in some sense, I've joked about it. I feel like all of us are like that, right? All of us have that. If we're not truly organized and have experience in organizing our efforts, it's very easy to jump from task to task to task and try to multitask. Because even in the work environment in corporate America, right? Like, you're expected to be able to multitask. You're expected to be able to juggle multiple projects at the same time. Like, if you're sitting on a meeting, like, it's almost expected that everyone on the call is actually doing something else while on the call, right? Like, no one is ever just locked in on the call, because if you spend all day on calls, and you're not going to have time to actually do the work that you're supposed to be doing. So most people, in corporate America, it's like they're paid to be able to, how well they're able to multitask. But then, you're talking about, in this case with ADHD folks, jumping around, like, that's kind of a negative trait. But in certain spaces, it's kind of seen like as a good thing to be able to juggle multiple projects. So I find that fascinating about ADHD folks, because I think a lot of us have a lot of the same characteristics that you talked about, and we haven't been diagnosed, and maybe we're not officially ADHD, but it's very relatable, I will say, to the way I feel sometimes.
So here's the thing. First of all, they did a study. It's like 30 years ago, I guess, but they ran it several times, so they're pretty accurate with it. When they studied how much actual work gets done in corporate America, when you're sitting at not the cashier at Walmart, but the person sitting at their desk, 50%. 50% of their day is productive work for the company. The other 50% is, oh my gosh, I got to call my
I
car
read that.
company and because I didn't make the payment, I got to deal with that. Or I'm trying to buy a birthday gift for my kid, or I'm trying to plan the wedding or something. 50% is what companies are getting. And so if you extrapolate that out, I look at that and I say, you know what? If I schedule 4 hours of actual solid, well planned out work, I'm ahead. I'm going to be ahead because I'm not going to quit at the end of that 4 hours. I've got that 4 hours, and that's what I do to this day. Actually, it's 4 hours worth of that. Then I have things like teaching classes, and anything is human. I'm interacting with someone. I don't count as part of that 4 hours. because it's easy. I love doing that. I would do that whether I got paid or not. So, but this tedious, dull, yucky stuff, no more than 4 hours. And I get it done, even if I stay up till midnight. And I don't always get it done, but I'm pretty fanatical about it because I know my life. I
Mm-hmm.
know what it can be like if I don't do it. And maybe that's an advantage I have, maybe disadvantage, I don't know. But when a person has been baptized by fire, so to speak, they know what it can be, how bad it can get, and that's a help. Um, so I, yeah, I just really want to say people with ADHD think they got to work 12 hours a day. When my life was falling apart, I was actually working 14 hours a day and I was getting nothing done. It was just in some frenetic vibration. My life was
Sheesh.
just collapsing around my ears, but I was busy, really busy. So yeah, and that's what happens when you think, well, I'm in the hole. I'm just going to dig faster, right? You got to stop digging and start figuring out some other way to make things work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, we could talk about this all day, but I do want to jump ahead here. You talked about we talked a little bit about stock market and stock investing.
Mhm.
And you made a comment that the stock market is a perfect market, and I don't think I've ever heard that term before. It's a perfect market, and you said unless you cheat, you don't really get ahead as much as people think you do by investing in the stock market. Talk a little bit about that because like I want to have guests on who specialize in stock market investing. Is it like pointless to bring them on because you're like it's unless you're cheating, you're not really going to make that much out of the stock market. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like
Yeah.
where did that idea come from?
Well, okay. First definition: perfect market means everybody has all the information all the time. And with today's computerized world, they have that information immediately. So you're not going to win by saying, oh, I read an article that Coca-Cola is moving into Brazil and they're going to sell a lot more stuff in Brazil. That's old news by the time it gets into a newspaper. It's old news by the time it gets onto the internet. The only people that can win with that news are the people who paid a lot of extra money to rent a space right next to the hub in New York City to get their trade in electronically a fraction of a second faster than the people in Chicago. That's the only way to win, by reading the news. To win that fraction of a second. And at this point, that's not illegal. But that's how the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's how they find cheaters, inside traders, things like that. Anybody who is beating the market on a consistent basis is cheating. That's just how it is. If I flip a coin 25 times and it comes up 22 times as heads, I'm doing something, right? I am not flipping that coin in a fair way somehow. Um, that's how they catch them. Martha Stewart's out there buying stuff, and then they say, oh, well, oh, you sit on the board of such and such, and you've got this information. You're not allowed to trade on that information. So that's how they catch people. They don't just look at every person that trades stock. They certainly don't look at the day traders. They look at the people who are doing better than they should be doing, and that's how they catch them. It is a mathematical certainty that it's a perfect market. I'm not saying you won't make money. I'm just saying you won't beat that market. If the market is delivering 10% on this risk level or 7% on this other risk level, that's what you will get. You will not get 6 or 8. You will get the 7. You will get what the market is delivering at that moment. You can't predict it. You can't.
So is that what, people who, I'm not going to say any names, who are congressmen and women, but their spouses, are investing in stocks. I'm not going to say any names.
Yeah.
They're able to make out so well because that's how they beat the system essentially.
One of the biggest scams going on right now. Oh, the tariffs are on, everything's down. Oh, you know what? Let's buy it all while it's down, because I just have a feeling that he's going to reverse the tariff thing. And they're in the government. This is insider trading, no matter how you look at it. So then they buy it when it's down, they sell it when it's high. And I was reading somebody made $27 million on some trade, very clearly on insider trading information. So
Who
that's
is
one of the biggest scams
that?
going on right now. What's that?
Who is that?
I forgot the name, and I probably shouldn't say it even. Just look it up. Look up 27 million recent, stock trade. So it's it's so the point is, I see in financial things for personal life 4 buckets. You got 4 buckets you got to pay attention to. Number one, we're not talking about budgeting now. Number one is your emergency fund. And that is not $25,000 like some trainers say. It's $1,000. It's some number so that if you're off 140 miles from your house, you can hand the guy your debit card and get your car fixed, right? And if you're on the cash envelope thing, he's not going to accept the fact that, hey, I'll send you the money. It's at home in an envelope in the cash. And it's not going to work, right? Nobody should be using cash. We can go down that rabbit hole if you forget. Don't use cash, especially if you're ADHD, no matter what. So that's the number one bucket.
Really?
Emergency
Well,
fund.
we'll get back to that one, because don't use cash is interesting, because a lot of people say, to help budget, use cash. That way you limit yourself to what you have in your hand. So we'll get back to that, but keep going.
Yeah, you want to do the cash thing now, or do the buckets?
No, keep going with your buckets.
Okay, so you got your emergency fund. That's handled, okay? And that money just stays in a checking account. You could probably use a credit card and get away with it, but basically I would say have cash, have $1,000 cash sitting there somewhere, depending on what area of the country, might be more, might be less. Whatever a true emergency is. If you get laid off from your work, that's not what I call an emergency. It's a problem, but it's not like I need the money now or else I can't get home. It's not my car that broke down. So the next bucket number 2, is reserves for income replacement. Okay. And it's a little bit of a misnomer, because what it really is enough to pay your minimum expenses for 3 to 6 months for most people. That's bucket number 2. Save that money up in the stock market, probably in an ETF, an exchange traded fund, non-volatile, really important that it be non-volatile. Volatility is not a measure of risk. It's a measure of volatility, how much it goes up and down. Tesla stock, really volatile, right? You don't want your reserves in Tesla stock. You may want to buy that later, but you do not want your reserve. When COVID-19 hit.
Why wouldn't I want my reserves in a savings account, though? Why would I want it in stocks? That doesn't sound liquid enough.
It's liquid. You can settle it out in 2 days, I believe now, might be 3. I think it's 2 days. So and you can write a check against it in a margin account. So you would want it in the, okay, it depends how risk averse you are. You could certainly put it into a high yield savings account, which used to be 4.7, and someone told me they were down to 3% now. They would get you something, right? So, and that would be ultimate security, because that's it's as good as you get, right? So things could go wrong, but it's as good as you get. So, but I would suggest, because I'm a little bit risk tolerant on that money. That money's got to be there, but you don't want it into anything volatile, because when COVID-19 hit, not only was the pandemic mishandled, in my opinion, but the stock market was down 30% because of it not going right. So now you got people who are lost their job because of COVID-19. Some of the 40 million people that were out of work, and that didn't even include a lot of people, so it's a lot higher than that. And you're selling your reserves off at 70 cents on the dollar, right? So you don't want volatility. You want it in something rock solid that's not going up and down very much. But you're probably going to get, in this world right now, 6 or 7% on that money. I'd rather get 6 or 7% than 3% in the bank, because it is pretty solid. I'm not buying Coca-Cola stock. I'm buying an ETF, an exchange traded fund, which is a basket of funds, probably got 50 stocks in there. If one of them goes completely belly up, it's 2% of the portfolio if it's equally balanced. So that's bucket number 2. Reserves for income replacement. For most people, 3 to 6 months is the target to hit. If you're self-employed, maybe you better have 12 months. If you're starting a business, maybe you need 24 months, because it takes a long time to get a business. That's what you call your runway. You got to have that runway. So that's bucket number 2. Bucket number 3 is still in the stock market. That's where you're putting your retirement funds and all that stuff. You can handle volatility, because you're not going to need the money right away. And if you can tolerate volatility, you will get a little higher return, because fewer people want that volatility, supply and demand. You get a better return for taking on that volatility risk in a way. It's not a risk to your investment. It's a risk to whether you can get your money out right away. But yeah, you can sell your stock, and I believe the settlement time is 2 days right now. So you get it. And the fourth bucket, see, I consider bucket number 2 and 3 as parking your money. I don't consider a stock market an investment. I believe it's parking. You're putting it there safely so you can get it later, right? So bucket number 4 is when you go into a market, it is not perfect. You talked about real estate. It's not a perfect market. So that's where you take your superior knowledge about something and step up to the table and play the game with your superior knowledge and abilities within that area. I have a friend who is a radiologist, and he invests in really small startups that are making medical devices. I don't know anything about those. If I was to invest in those same, startups, and he invests in those same startups, I'm leaving my money on the table, and he's walking away with a win once in a while, right? So that's truly investing. If you know more about real estate than some other people, maybe you know more about your neighborhood, whatever it is, you can buy. Maybe you're a contractor. You can go out and say, hey, I know how to fix these houses. I know what's wrong with that house. I'm not buying it because that'll cost a fortune. This other one, I know I can fix it up. Some other person who just watched some, fancy program about how to make $1 zillion in real estate, they're buying the house that's no good because they don't know what they're doing. But if you bring your superior knowledge about real estate to the table, you can buy the right house, and you can buy it for, depends what part of the country, but you can buy it for 150,000, put 50,000 into it, sell it for 250 or 300 if you know what you're doing. So that's truly investing, in my opinion. You cannot do that with real estate. I'm sorry, you can't do that with the stock market.
Wow, that's interesting. So I want to get into real estate, but before we go there, can we go back to the cash? So you said, listen, a lot of people say don't use card because when you go to the store, when you have a card, you're just gonna swipe away. You have no control. Oh, you want this thing while you're standing in line, you're gonna get it, right? You're gonna go over it. When you go into the grocery store, into Walmart, Publix, wherever, with a card, you're doomed to go over. Whereas if you have cash, you're limited to what you have in hand. So you're basically telling people to do the exact opposite of what these experts are telling people to do. Can you explain why you would say don't use cash?
Yep, absolutely. And we're never certain of everything, but I'm 99.9% certain of this, right? And there are trainers out there. You're right. There's one of them that remain nameless, but he says, use cash, use cash, use cash. And I'm online, by the way, swipe your card here because I want to sell you my product. No, he didn't tell somebody to mail in the cash.
That's a lot of them doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So they're talking about something they don't know anything about, right? That's what my position is. People that use cash, neurotypical or ADHD, it has no consumer protections. It can be lost or stolen. You may not have it with you when you need it. There's all kinds of reasons not to use it. It's not gaining any interest while it's sitting in your wallet. And I get it. I used to be that person where money would just go through my fingers, but it didn't matter whether it was cash or not. If I had $100 bill in my pocket, I mean, what's it weigh? A fraction of an ounce? If I spent it for some $98 shiny penny thing that I wanted, the only thing that's missing is that $100 bill. That's nothing. So it's just a piece of paper. And now I've got this shiny penny thing, which I'm going to take home and, covet, because that's what we do with our material stuff these days. So you're not insulated when you use cash. Cash will run right through your fingers. But here's the real biggest reason to do it. Now, all those other reasons are true. The biggest reason is if I think I spent $50 at Starbucks last month and I'm going to put that in my budget, I'm trying to budget myself. I think I spent $50. I don't know. I didn't save all the receipts. I've got ADHD. I'm not going to save the receipts. I'm not going to tabulate them all up for all the different things I do in my life. Yeah, I think it was $50. I write it down. Well, if I put it all on my credit card or debit card, I put it all on my credit card, I can look at the statement and I say, oh, it was $247. And we typically underestimate what we've been spending on things. Now, $247 at Starbucks might be okay with me, but at least I got to know what that number is. So I put it in my budget. And so I can say, that's way out of line. I shouldn't be doing that. I'm having a hard enough time paying my utility bills, and yet a couple $100 is going to Starbucks. I could probably go to Starbucks for 50 with my friends and just don't splurge as much, buy something less, right? So something else. So it's cash is not trackable. You will not know you spent it. There's one thing to remember, just one thing about a credit card that'll cure this whole idea of you said no control. Um, my client said he didn't have any control. I'd metaphorically slap him, right? Whose life is it? It's your life, right? Of course, you have control. You're deciding to do these things. So, um, what I would say is the one thing about a credit card is just remember it's not your money. It's not your money. It's convenience. So if you pay that bill off within 25 days, I think it is, from the statement coming out, you pay zero interest. And if you get a card with no annual fee, which is easy, they're out there, you're never going to pay anything on it. And yet you're able to buy what you want to buy when you want to buy it without the risk of, losing your money or whatever happens to be. You do have a lot of consumer protections. And when you go to do your budget, it's all right there. You can print it out and write it down, or you can use Rocket Money to crunch those numbers with, automatically for you. Um, if you remember that it's not your money, and here's where people get in trouble. Okay, so I've got a credit card. I'm down there at the sporting goods thing and say, oh, I didn't know I wanted a kayak today, but that's really exciting. I'm going to buy that kayak. I'm really impulsive. I'm going to buy that thing, $700 or whatever they cost. I don't know. Take it home, really excited about it. And then I get the bill and it's, oh, my minimum payment is $23. So I mail off, I pay $23 on the minimum payment on the card because I don't realize it's not my money, right? So now I've paid $23 on a $700 purchase. Well, it's an unbalanced equation. I've got $700 worth of pleasure. I've got $23 worth of pain because I don't see the future, right? I'm a present-minded ADHD person. I have a huge present bias. So I got this exciting thing I can show it to my friends, and we can go out, out on the river. But I only had to pay $23. So of course I'm going to repeat that right up to my credit limit because it's exciting. But if I bought the thing for 700, and now I come home and I go online on the portal and I say, oh man, $700 on there. And using my checking account, I pay the $700 bill. Now I've got $700 worth of pleasure, $700 worth of pain. I decide whether or not that was a good decision or not. That's the only problem with credit cards is people treat it like it's their money, and then they ramp it up and up and up and up, and pretty soon they're $100,000 in credit card debt, which is, not cheap. Credit cards are,
And that's why they say don't use credit cards, though. Like that's the thing. That's why they say the temptation to view the money on a credit card as your own is why they say don't use credit cards, because just use cash. If you go to the store, you run out of cash, that's it. Yeah, it didn't gain any interest. It didn't do anything positive for you, but at least it didn't put you in over your head, right? So at least with cash, you'll stay at zero. With credit card, you are bound, for most people, to go into the negative. And at this point, zero is better than the negative. I think that's like the argument for using cash.
that's their argument. Yeah. What I'm saying is that it doesn't work that way. it it If you treat it like it's your money, yes, it works that way because then you've got this unbalanced equation. But if you say, nope, I'm going to be responsible with this card. I don't want to pay 25%. I don't want to pay 2% every month for my interest because that's, 24% is 2% a month. I don't want to do that. But I do like the convenience. I do want to put my PG&E, my utility bill on the card. I do want to have all of my payments automated. I don't even want to have to. I just every payment I have, I want it automated, so it just happens. Well, I need a card to do that on. I could put it on a debit card, but the risk there, and I've seen it happen with people lots of times, they put the utility bill on the checking account, and then they forget to move money in the checking account because they don't have much money, and it's painful. And now the utility company's not happy because that bounced, and the bank's charging them a non-sufficient funds fee. So you end up getting bound up with all kinds of stuff. If you can and we're adults, right? So if you can learn how to use the credit card responsibly, they're incredibly good tools. 150 years ago, everybody rode a horse to work, right? And we still have horses, just like we still have cash. But we have better ways to get to work. We don't take the horse to work. We have better ways to buy and pay our bills. I don't know anybody that's doing well financially that uses cash. I don't know anybody. And if that system that you're talking about worked, then those people would be outstripping the rest of us, and they're not. They're not
Yeah,
even
no, I
paying
mean
they're not even treading
that's
water.
just what the gurus, the famous gurus, that's what they say, right? Avoid plastic, use cash. I just
Yep.
find the convenience, the convenience of the car to me just makes sense. I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm perfect. Like I said, I'm not great. I'm not the master at sticking to a budget,
Right.
but I mean, I'm comfortable enough to say, handling cash is like you walk in. What if there is an emergency and you need something? Then you're like, oh man, I don't have enough cash to get it. So that I hear your argument, man. It's just different from what the people who get paid millions of dollars to talk.
Yeah. And
It's
and I can see
totally
it.
opposite of that. So good
To
point.
every rule, there's some exceptions. If you're a serious prepper, for example, okay, yeah, you want cash because you think the grid's going to go down and we're going to be in a civil war or something. So yeah, you want some cash so you can buy gasoline at the pump, even though the credit cards aren't working, right? So there might be some exceptions. Um, I'll tell you another one of those that was something different. I was gonna say why. Yeah, that was a real estate thing. It's related, but it's different. So no, I will stand by that. Using cash is a huge risk factor, and I don't know anybody who uses cash that is doing well financially.
Let's get into some real estate advice and guidance. So first of all, you said, when we talked, you said, you can turn any tenant, into a homeowner. And I'd like to talk about that because a lot of people finding it hard to buy a house now. Everything is super expensive. I mean, it's great for existing homeowners because our property values have gone up, equity is great, and things like that, right? But if you're a first-time homeowner, it's probably not a great time right now to be trying to buy a house. Interest rates are high, housing, is expensive. Um, what would be your strategy to get someone to say who says, "Hey, man, things are rough out there. It's too expensive. Interest rates are killing." To get them from renting to actually owning a house.
Yeah, and I know I'm sounding like maybe I am a contrarian. I don't know, but a lot of these common thoughts that we have are not correct. Anybody who says interest rates are too high, I'm not going to buy right now is foolish. Foolish.
Really? Why not?
Absolutely.
Because they are though. Like
Okay, they
they
are.
were they
There's
were they were 4% a couple years ago.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And now they're probably 7% or something. I don't know. I don't follow it.
Yeah.
But they'll say they're 7. So what do you think's going to happen when the cycle of the market happens and they go from 7 down to 4? What do you think's going to happen to the price of that property?
The price of the property
Supply
is
and
going to drop.
demand. A lot more people can qualify. Same number of houses. They're going to go up,
You think
right?
it's going to go up?
I guarantee it. If the interest rates go from 7 to 4, there'll be a whole lot more demand for houses. Because that guy that's saying, I don't want to buy it at 7%, I want to buy it now at 4%. Well,
That's a good
great.
point.
Get on the train in the rush hour and try to buy the house. But that's what's going to
But
happen.
right, you're gonna ask for more, but the market is going. Well, I don't know what the market is gonna say, but the market could say that the house that you thought was $500,000 is actually $300,000. Unless you're saying that there is no such thing as depreciation of home values, right? Then I could understand that. But interest rates could go down and the valuation of the house can go down as well, right?
So, with a couple major exceptions, 2 of them, since the Great Depression, home prices have trended upwards. Now, there have been like the subprime era meltdown, right? When it was a lending debacle. So there have been those times, but that had to do with the ease of qualifying for the loan. But supply and demand being what it is, if you're looking at a particular house, people don't buy the price of the home. Let's start with that. The home costs 100,000. Just pick a number. It costs 100,000. Well, the buyer doesn't. It's just a number to the buyer. The buyer says, "Well, okay, but how much does it cost me per month? What can I pay for out of my paycheck? It's $600 a month. Okay, I can afford $600 a month. I'll buy the $100,000 house. They buy it. Okay, so when the interest rates go let's just say they double, and let's just keep it simple. Say the $600 payment goes to $1,200. It doesn't matter what the price of that home is. What the buyer's looking at is at $1,200 a month. Oh, I can't afford it anymore, or I'm too scared to buy it at that. I think it'll come back down. I'll buy it when it comes down. So they're out of the market. Supply and demand, fewer buyers, houses don't appreciate as much, right? And when there's lots of buyers, demanding market, they tend to go up. There's not the only factor, but it's a big one. So if you don't buy when the interest is at 7, and you may not do it because you can't qualify, that's another factor. But if you don't buy it then, you may buy it when it's back down to 4 or 3 or something, but you're almost always going to pay more for that house. And you can't change the price of the house, what you paid. What you paid for it's what you paid for it. But if you're paying 7% interest and it drops down to 4, well, if you qualified at 7, you're going to qualify for a refi at 4. So if you're bought the house at $1,200 a month, like we were saying, I don't like this $1,200 stuff. Oh, but I just bought the house for 100 and now it's worth 150 because rates are down to 3. I'm going to refinance and drop my $1,200 payment to $600, and I own a $150,000 house instead of the guy who waited, who's now paying 150 for the house. Rates, it's not a one-to-one relationship, but when interest rates go up, prices, there's a downward pressure on prices. They don't usually go down because real estate has a utility value. People don't have to sell. They're living in it, right? They don't have to sell it. So rather than the market prices dropping on real estate, they just kind of get stagnant usually, unless it goes on too long and then people get desperate. But the housing, it goes up and up and then it plateaus, and it goes up and up and it plateaus. Once in a great while, it dips a little bit. Or a lot, subprime meltdown. That was
So why do you think housing, why do you think housing went up then in the last couple of years, right? Like interest rates and housing prices both went up at the same time. Why do you think that happened?
I think and I'd have to look at these graphs, but I can almost guarantee you that when rates were like 3%, 3.5%, my girlfriend has a 2.99% loan on her house now, right? It used to be whatever, it was much higher than that before she refied it. That when rates were that low, a lot of people could qualify. So a lot of people were buying properties, right? And then real estate has momentum. Oh my gosh, properties have gone up 7% every year for the last 3 or 4 years. If I don't buy a house now, I'll never be able to buy it. I know the interest rates are high, but I'm going to keep buying anyway because I don't want to miss my chance. I saw that when I first started in real estate. I'll date myself here, but a paper borrower could put 20% down and get a 17% first loan. It's like putting a house on a credit card. People were buying houses. There was a lot of creative financing going on. But the fact is, they were still buying houses and financing with banks too. So it's not a one-to-one relationship between interest rates and prices, but they are correlated. Trust me. If you're going to wait for something, interest rates is not the thing, right? Because when the interest rates come down, that's when everybody starts to buy. I would rather buy when interest rates were high if I thought, and we get to this unpredictability parts again, but if I thought they were unreasonably high, that would be the time to buy a piece of property, because nobody can sell their property in that market, right? They're all trying to sell and there's nobody can afford to buy it, and they're not doing it. And they're staying away from the markets and think their rates are too high. It doesn't cost much to refinance.
How much attention then do you pay on the house, the price of the property then?
Not much. I look at, like an appraiser would do, what are the values of the comparables? What are properties in the area selling for? If this is a custom home, it's a harder thing to do. But if it's a cookie cutter tract home, you can predict that. You can drive down the street and get it within $10,000 in most neighborhoods. And if you actually look at the house, see the condition and everything, you can get it a lot closer than that. I would look at the value of the house based on appraisal. And if you're experienced, you can pretty well, if you know your neighborhood, you can appraise it yourself in some respect. Obviously, the bank isn't going to take your word for it. The bank wants a legitimate appraisal, but you can figure that out. You know what your house is worth, or the house you're looking at is worth.
So investing in real estate then, right? like it sounds like you've mastered the whole thing. Somebody like me who's looking at it, and I've been, reading and wanted to get into real estate, talking to different people. It seems like there are people who are in the game already, who are already winning, and then there's the rest of us who are just looking on the outside. Like, how do you break
Yes.
into that? Because it seems like there are, you talk about insiders and cheating. It seems like there are folks who are insiders. They have all the insider information about all the properties who may be, undervalued or whatever the case may be. They have the funding to be able to jump in, buy everything up and then, remodel it, fix whatever they got to fix, right? All the fixer uppers, they know all of everything about them. They have the cash to buy them all, sell them all, do the cycle all over every month. Somebody like me who doesn't have the all the connections, who doesn't have a ton of cash sitting around, like how would someone like me jump into this market and actually start making money in real estate?
Two things. I'll do this, the more important one second. Well, let's talk about owner occupied properties second. Okay, remind me of that. So
Mm-hmm.
if I wanted to begin investing in properties, meaning buy a property to renovate or buy a bunch of properties to rent out, right? Which I would advocate against doing that if I were you, but not for money. I mean, it's a very profitable enterprise. Being a landlord is very profitable. So if I was going to do that and I didn't know very much, there are uh, exchange groups all over the place, right? Trading groups. So I would go to them. I would go, I don't know if they're in person or not. I hope some of them are. That's what I did. I would go to these groups and I would listen to the pitches. They'd say, "Oh, I've got this 7 unit little unit, this property. My seller wants to sell it, and they'll carry some of the paper." And if I was interested, I'd go up and I'd talk to that person when they were done with their pitch, and I would learn more about them. And at those meetings, usually there's a time when they kind of break up and everybody has lunch and chemistry being what it is, you gravitate to certain people. Oh yeah, I want to talk to that guy. So you sit next to somebody who knows what they're doing. You're learning a lot of stuff just by asking questions, right? And not only do you do that, you're learning at that moment, which is gonna. I'd rather learn that way than learn by putting a $50,000 down payment on something and learning the hard way, right? Because you only have so many of those. So you learn that way. But you're doing another thing, which is crucial in the real estate business, is you're getting to know people who are in the business doing things. If you want your phone to ring, that's what you want. If you want to be an investor in buying fixer-upper properties, which I did for quite a while, I didn't want to have to keep looking for them. I wanted my phone to ring. I wanted some agent who lists junky property, so to speak. I want them to call me and say, "Hey, Rick, I got a property coming on the market. I think you might like it. I know what you want. And I've heard from you. I know what your parameters are." They don't waste your time. They would call me up and say, "This is coming on the market. Why don't you get over there and take a look at it?" And for some of the agents or individuals, I would jump out of my chair and go look because they are always feeding me good leads. It's like you're in a business. Do you want a referral, a set of referral clients coming into you, or do you want to go spend a ton of money on Facebook advertising trying to find people? Right? You you go to these marketing sessions, you meet people, you learn things, you get excited, you learn what aspect of it you like. I mean, I learned really early on that I don't do foundations and I don't do roofs. Right? They're expensive and they're problematic, but I'm great with windows and carpets and remodeling bathrooms. That I love to do that. So I learned what part of it I liked to do. Um, and then financing's a problem. One of the things you can do if you don't have money, there's a lot of scam type guys out there, but if you go to these sessions, you're going to find people who are looking for partners too. And you might say, "Hey, I haven't got any money. You got money and you want to buy this thing. And I'm long on time. I'll go fix this place for you. I'll do the work." When I first I didn't have any money. Okay. First month I bought three. I didn't even know what I was going to buy them, but I ended up buying three properties first month out the gate. Um, and
Wow.
I it was all owner financing. I went back to the friend of mine, the guy I worked with for quite a while, in former job, and I said, "I need $6,000, and if you can put it up for me, I'll do all the work on these properties. I'll split this 50-50 with you, and we're just
6,000.
partners." That's all it took. Well, we're talking 40 years ago, but yeah, it was it. I need 6,000 to do this. We didn't even use the whole 6,000, and we had three properties, and then of course we had to get in and do a lot of work. But that's we're not trying to scam anybody. We're doing the work. I That's another scam people fall for. Don't try to buy don't try to buy a property under market value, and don't try to sell it over market value. It's a fool's game. You may win once or twice, but you're not going to make a business out of that. You're going to make a business by buying a property that genuinely needs X number of dollars for work. You multiply that by maybe 3 and say, okay, now I can formulate my offer on this piece of property. It's 100,000
So what?
plus
So what's
25.
the difference between what you just said? What's the difference between the two? Like I feel like what you said at first is the same as the second. Like
I'm
what do you
not
mean?
looking to take advantage of somebody, right? I'm not looking at somebody who's in foreclosure and say, oh my gosh, I can take advantage of one of my mantras. I don't want to make my living off of someone else's misery. If someone's in foreclosure, I'm not going to swoop in and say, oh my gosh, I'll give you 2,000 for the property and I'll take over the loans, right? I'm not going to do that, right? But I do find lots of people, landlords usually, who don't want their property anymore. They're not going to give it away, and I'm not trying to steal it from them, but they don't want it anymore. They don't want to be a landlord. It's a hassle. Being a landlord is a tough job, right? If you think it's easy, try it, but it's a tough job.
I'm
To
sure it
do it
is.
right, I would say. But I can go to an owner like that and say, okay, yep, you looks like your property will appraise for 200,000, and you've got $25,000 worth of deficiencies here. I know if I cure those, that property will be worth 300,000. So I can give you what that property is worth today, knowing that I'm going to come in and spend another 20, and I don't have the cash, so I want you to carry the paper. You make the loan. You carry the loan for me. I will buy it from you. I'll spend my 25,000 fixing it up. You've got a trustee on the property, so you're going to get paid. I'll spend my money fixing it up, and I'll sell it a year later. I wouldn't put too tight a fuse on that, but my plan might be to go in and fix it all up and sell it in 6 months. So I'm telling him a year. Now it gets sold. He gets his money. I get my $75,000 override or whatever it is, and it's not going to be that high on a property that size, but I get my override, and I did it all at market value. I didn't take advantage of a buyer or a seller. And it's a much better. You wake up feeling better about yourself.
You're like a ethical investor, which is which is
Well,
rare to come by. Um,
and let's go back to meaning and purpose. What purpose do you serve in this world if all you're doing is trying to make a lot of money by taking advantage of people? That is not going to serve you well in the long run. Viktor Frankl taught us that it's better in some ways to be the victim than the perpetrator. The victim leaves the situation with clean hands. They didn't do anything wrong. The perpetrator lives with that stain the rest of their life. So I don't want
Man,
to
it
be that
seems like a
person.
lot of people doing the winning are perpetrators. They have no problem.
No doubt. Oh, they do have problems.
A lot of
You
people,
don't
a
think
lot
some
of
of the
people in
political stuff,
leadership positions, a
you
lot of
don't
people
think
in
they have
leadership
problems?
positions in this country are perpetrators.
Well, from a psychological, and I have a psych background, uh, they have damaged themselves, and they cannot do what they're doing unless they become callous, non-empathetic, unless they can be pathological liars in some way, unless they can be, I'm struggling for the word, but sociopathic, unless they can do things and not feel it. And the only way you can do things and not feel it is the damage that you've done to yourself. You don't have those feelings anymore. Now you can do horrible things and sleep at night. Well, you're no longer that same person that you might have been before. I'm not saying
Mm.
that's an answer to things, and we definitely have to figure out how to rein some of this stuff in, um, that's going on in the world today. And yes, they do make a ton of money, no doubt about that. I'm not saying you can't come out ahead by cheating people. I'm just I think it's a short-sighted thing to do for most of us.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you so going back to real estate investing and money, right? How how do you recommend somebody get money for real estate, right? Like to start investing. Like you're working hard, but honestly, you don't have 20,000 to put down on anything. Are there any resources or any things that I'll call them tricks that you
Yep,
recommend to get started?
yep. One of the ones we used to use, not a whole lot, but we did use it. I think it's called an FHA 203B. I probably had the numbers wrong. It's been a long time, but that's where you can actually buy a property with, I think it's the same 3.5% down on it. And they basically make two loans, in backroom jargon, we call it a takeout loan. That's going to, first you get a construction loan, then you get a takeout loan. So they will lend you the money to buy that property, and then you got to get the work done. But then they will give you a takeout loan that gives you all that money back based on the after repair value appraisal. That would be one way. That's for an investment.
I've never heard of takeout loan.
Yeah, it's a slang thing, but basically, when someone's going to build a home on spec, they're going to get paid out in tranches. They've got to get 20% down, like 20% down, like the foundation and everything, and then the bank funds the next 20%, and they have to do all the framing, and then the bank funds the next 20%. So that, and eventually, those are all construction loans, which are short term, and then eventually, the bank prearranged. You don't do this without having it prearranged, but prearranged, the bank says, okay, well, here's your takeout loan. Here's your 30-year fixed rate loan at 7% on the property. And they wipe out all the construction loans and give you one first mortgage or a first trustee loan. So, well, let's go a slightly different direction, because this is what I like. Owner-occupied properties. Massive numbers of people in this country would benefit tremendously if they would own a piece of property, but they don't know how to do it. And they feel like they've been locked out of it. And in a lot of ways they have. It's not getting any better. So
yeah, interest rates are high. We talked about it. Interest rates are high. Housing prices are high. Yeah, they're out of it. So talk to us about that.
All of it is high. So there are a bunch of different ways to do that. There's 100 different ways to buy properties, and they don't all involve bank loans and things like that, although they certainly can. I want to dispel a myth, first of all, another one, like the cash thing. The myth that it's cheaper to rent. It is not cheaper to rent. I just want to slap people. It's not cheaper to rent. I was talking to a friend of mine who's 20 years younger, and she was saying how a great deal she had on a rent-controlled property in San Francisco, and it was cheap rent. It was cheap rent. It was like half of what market was. And I just said, seriously, if that landlord gave it to you rent-free, in fact, if that landlord paid you $1,000 a month to live there, you're coming out behind. You're coming out behind. That property has gone up $1 million in the last 4 years that you've been in that property. It is crazy what that landlord has made. You haven't participated in that. Yeah, you got cheap rent. You only had to pay whatever, I forgot what it was, $2,300 rent or something like that. And I don't remember all the exact numbers, but she's coming out behind, right? I mean, that was then. She's now married and owns a house. So anyway, the idea that it's cheaper to rent is nonsense. The only place where it's cheaper is in cash flow sometimes. Yes, you may have to pay,
Right.
You might be able to rent something for $1,200 when it might be $1,700 to own it, right? Yes, cash flow, maybe. But if you look at the numbers going forward, when you add in the appreciation of the property and you get to write off the interest off your taxes, right? And the loan keeps coming down, a certain piece of your loan, your payment is principal, and that grows as time goes by. It's just night and day better to own that property. With some exceptions. I mean, if you're going to move in a year, I wouldn't do it, right? Because it costs money to transact and all that. So there's so many different ways. Owner financing is a real thing. You don't have to be a bank to make a loan. So if I own a property, I'm a landlord and I'm disgruntled, just get me out of this property. And maybe I haven't been maintaining it, because a lot of landlords, they don't have the cash flow, and so they'd rather spend it on their vacation maybe than fixing the property. So they've gotten to be kind of slumlords in a way. So the property's got a lot of deficiencies. Maybe they can't sell it on the open market because the buyer can't get an FHA loan because the thing's got a bad roof, won't qualify. Well, I could go to that person and I could say, you know what? I know you want 200,000, but you're not getting 200,000. You could probably drop it to 180 and get your price. I'll give you 200,000 now, but I only have 10,000 to put down. Here it is. And you make me $190,000 loan for the next X number of years, and I'll make payments to you. And here's my job history. Here's my loan application. I'll just hand you this stuff so you can evaluate it just like a lender would do. You make that loan to me. I'll buy this house, take it off your hands, you go home and sleep well. I'll fix this property up and I'm going to live in it, right? A lot of a lot of landlords, they actually like the idea that someone's going to own the property because they know how good it's done for them over the years. So they're not going to give up a rental if they're into the rental thing. But if they're disgruntled and tired of renting, they'll be happy to feel good about selling it to someone who wants to live in it. You could do that, outright purchase. You could do a lease option. And a lot of realtors don't like lease options because they think they don't close. If you do them right, they
What's
always
that?
close. A lease option means you lease it with the option to purchase it. And that's not a first right of refusal. First right of refusal is not worth the paper it's written on. But don't even think about that. But if I say, okay, you want to rent the property for $2,000 a month, and it's a $200,000 property, and you may want to sell it someday, but you can't sell it because the market's bad, or whatever it is, you're not getting your price. I'll tell you what, I'll rent it from you for $2,000. In fact, I'll give you $2,500 in rent. And what I want is the option to buy it at today's price, $200,000. Anytime in the next 18 months, it probably will go up in value in that time. So I want to be able to buy it. And I'm giving you an extra $500 in rent, but I want $1,000 a month credit toward my down payment. The banks will accept that as long as it's reasonable. So now, 18 months later, I have an $18,000 credit built up with the seller, which the bank will accept. And so then I go get an FHA loan on the property. Maybe I've had to fix it during the option period, so it will pass the inspection. So I have 18,000. A $200,000 property, FHA is going to want a $7,000 down payment out of me, plus some closing costs. So I have 18,000 at my disposal. So I say, oh, okay, that's great, but I want to put $18,000 down. Here it is. Bank says, great, your credit's good, all that stuff's good. Now you own the property. You never actually came up with a down payment at all. There's 100 different ways to do this. You just got to get creative. And if you got ADHD, you're going to be creative, right? That's obviously not entirely true, but we do tend to not know where the lines are. So we color outside the lines and we hit some home runs sometimes.
Those
There's a
are
lot of ways to buy a house.
trade secrets. Like I've heard of some. I've heard of the lease option a little bit. Since you explained it, I've heard of that, but I didn't hear of. I've never heard of the put $1,000 as down payment or whatever, right, as credit to use as a down payment of the future. I've never heard of that like combination.
And I'll tell you why I do that. Because I, I didn't want my client, the tenant, to lose out. I wanted them to own the property. I didn't want them to be paying for something all this time. They could have bought something else maybe. So I said, what is the biggest impediment to people buying a property? For first-time buyers to buy a property, it's the down payment. It's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And if you sign a lease option saying, I'll put $10,000 down in a year and a half, and you've never saved $10,000 in your life, guess what? You're not going to save it in a year and a half. I don't care how motivated you are. It's not going to happen. It's not who you are. It's not your internal narrative. So if I build it into the lease, it's automatic. You pay your rent on time, and you've been doing that for the last 10 years. I see your records. If you can pay your rent on time for the next 18 months, you will have whatever it was, 18,000 built up as a down payment. You will have it. You don't even have to sacrifice other than, yes, you're paying $500 more, but we're buying a property well within their capabilities. So I would not stretch to buy that. One of the biggest mistakes I kept making was I would stretch to buy, because I'm all about mathematics, right? I'm thinking, well, if a $200,000 property is going to improve and go up by 10%, that's 20,000. If I could buy a $2 million property, that's 200,000. So why wouldn't I stretch somehow and buy the 2 million? And if I can get creative, I can probably do it. And that's what we do. But when I'm representing a client, in the old days, I would not want them to stretch, because I don't want to be sitting there and get that phone call. Oh man, I missed my payments and my options toast, and
Yeah.
now I don't know what to do. I don't want to be in that position. I want them to own the house. We talked about business earlier. If you're always out looking for new clients, you're not running your business right in most cases, right? If you're selling bottles of ketchup, maybe, but if you're selling real estate and you're always looking for new clients, you're not doing it right. If you help someone buy a house that way and they own it, they're going to tell their friends, right? You're not going to have to go out looking for people. A little bit maybe, but for the most part, people are going to come to your door because you did something that their friend really loved or their relative really loved. Yeah, if you're, depends on the business, but if you're in the real estate sales business and after a year and a half, you're
I
still
hear you.
looking for
Yeah.
business, you're doing it wrong.
All right. So before we get out of here, great information, by the way. I feel like we could talk for hours about this stuff
Got quiet.
because it's really educational. But wanted to, you wanted to talk about, disparities, in the market, financial disparities, fairness, unfairness, and how things pretty much play out across racial lines, to be honest. And people who have followed this podcast know I don't really shy away from these kind of conversations and make some people uncomfortable. I don't mind having them, but the numbers don't lie that wealth distribution is is terrible, right?
Yes.
White folks, black folks, it's different spectrums, and it's not necessarily because some people's spending habits are different than others, right? That's what we've been led to believe.
Got nothing to do with it.
So you had some thoughts on that you wanted to share.
Yeah. And it's a, I don't shy away from these conversations either. I think we got to have them as a society. Unfortunately, they're trying to bury our history, which is, I think it's just, that's like burying a tumor and ignoring it. Right? You're going to die from cancer, right? The whole country will die from it.
Well, they're getting rid
So,
of books, man. They're getting rid of books.
yeah, well, I know. And they did that. Hitler did that too, right? They got rid of books, but look what happened. 55 million people died, or 65 million people died before that guy was defeated, right? Now, 2/3 of them were civilians. So, uh, yeah, all that stuff's happening. I, the, like 18 different directions to go here, but the disparities are high. The history is there, right? From redlining, the GI Bill came along, and anybody, black, white, green, whatever, they could use the GI Bill to buy a property. But then they'd walk into a bank and they say, "Oh no, we don't lend to you people." Right? So even though they were the the government said it was okay in that respect, the institutions weren't forced to comply with that. So all kinds of things there, and then history. Our history is replete with this stuff. Um, at this point, um, actually, I want to go down something I'm actually pretty proud of myself, and you may cut it out later. I don't know, because I don't know if it's germane to your thing, but one of the things that really got me started in the real estate business, I I wanted to own a home, and I couldn't own where I was selling because it was too expensive. And I bought a home in a much lower income area, and it was quite racially mixed, and that was fine with me. I mean, I don't know, my wife's from Mexico City, so it's fine with me. Um, but I found this area where the city was buying under eminent domain. That's where they basically take your property for the market value, hopefully, so they can build a road or a school or stuff like that. But they don't do that anymore. Now they say, we're taking your property because we want to build a subdivision here. We'll get a lot more property tax out of that, and basically gentrify an area. So, and I didn't know anything about that stuff. I was like, whatever, 30 years old at the time. And so I met one of these people and I was looking at it. So the property's got to be worth more than that. So I went down, not an attorney, but I went down to the city and I said, well, you've offered like 20,000 for this property, and I think it's like worth 40. Right? What's going on here? What, 40 was an exaggeration. And they hemmed and hawed and stuff. And I got upset and I said, no, we're not doing it. I know you can take us to court. We're not doing it. So anyway, she got an offer, I think, of like 35. 20 was her opening shot, and she would have just taken it, right? Because people roll over. But she got like 35. And then
Mhm.
word spread. I ended up with about 40 transactions out of that neighborhood, and they were hated me in the city, I'm sure. Well, I don't think they did. They're hourly workers. They're salaried. It wasn't their money. They're spending tax money. But all those people got a whole lot more money for their property because they stood up to the city and said, no, here's my appraisal. Your appraisal's bogus. Here's another one. Show me I'm wrong. Um, and
Mhm.
so I think that's where we all, as people, we have to stand up and say what's not right and what is right. Um, and the racial disparities, they have nothing to do with personal accountability. That's what they say on the right to justify their actions. No, it's political policy based stuff. All this, and it could be changed. It was changing quite well up until about 1973, and then we started going back down the other side. It was a golden era for us between end of World War II and 1973. I'm not saying everything was good, but
Really?
things were getting better.
I wasn't around back then. I wasn't
Yeah,
around back then. I don't know anyone who believes like it was a golden era back in the 70s. Like weren't people still being like lynched and stuff back then? Like
like,
so I don't know any black person who would say that it was a golden era. Like
oh, they would,
I don't know
they
when the
would.
golden era was.
They wouldn't say it was a golden era, but from the close of World War II to 1973, things were on an upward trend. Civil rights were getting better. All kinds of things were passed. Women were getting the right to have credit cards and buy homes, even if they weren't married. All these things were getting better until around 73, when it all started going back to the other way in terms of decreased regulation. Regulation is what helps us in some ways, not over-regulation. But in 73, things started going back down. And then we get all this deregulation stuff. And then we start getting, if you look at the disparities, both racially and in the entire population, they were getting smaller, not bigger. And this was the biggest middle class that's ever happened in human history, that happened after World War II. But then it started getting tanked and around. It's not a real clear line, but there were a bunch of things that started going wrong in the early 70s, and they just continued to this day. Um, so so anyway, I want to say,
How do we fix that? How do we fix that and make things better moving forward? So I'm not sitting here asking for handouts. I'm actually not a fan of handouts.
no.
But how do we adjust that to allow for those who have been taken advantage of to catch up in some way?
I really don't know, especially in the climate we're in now, which is clearly a white supremacist government that we have. So I don't know how you deal with it, um, but I do know education is a very powerful thing, and maybe they will be burning the books, but there's a lot of books out there written by very knowledgeable people to keep this kind of history alive. And then I think most people have a conscience. Unfortunately, there's a underlying, you know, level of racism which we don't acknowledge, but it's within us, and it drives a lot of these decisions that people make when they elect a politician, for example. You know, we're we're far afield here, but most whites don't think that they're racist because they're not bigots, right? They will honestly say, "Hey, I got a black person who was a friend." I can say that. I've got several that are friends.
I
That
have
doesn't
black
mean I'm not a
friends.
bigot.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
anything, I could say that person is the exception to all those people in the city who are selling drugs and stuff, right? So the idea that a white person's not a bigot is their argument that they're not a racist. And they're two very different things. A racist has to do with policies and all those things, the big stuff. A bigot is person to person, right? So I think education is the biggest thing that helps. But I don't, right now we're going the wrong direction. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. So how do we educate people? I mean, that's part of my platform, right? I want to educate my listeners, you
Yeah.
know, have conversations like this. Hopefully people stick around and listen to and don't get too uncomfortable and leave when they hear these types of conversations. But I think they're necessary because as you know, people in power um, make decisions that impact people negatively. They line their pockets. They don't care. Like you said, they've become so callous. Like they don't care. They do things just, just for themselves, for their own benefit. How do
Yeah.
we, as a population, still look out for each other and make it an equitable place, despite the fact that people want to tell us, well, it's better than it was before, right? But there's still injustices out there that are just,
Yeah.
maybe in the shadows, in the background. Some of it is, in broad daylight, but a lot of it is in the shadows that people don't really see. And when you call it out, it's hard for them to really identify with it.
Yeah. I think a bunch of different thoughts on that. First of all, it was better not in every way, but in a lot of ways, it was better for black people in 1973 than it is today. It was better. They were able to do a lot of things that they
Again, I
cannot
wasn't
do.
around, but it's hard for me to believe.
Yeah. I'm not saying it was good. I'm not saying it was good at all. I mean, the Kerner report told us exactly what to do about it, but that was buried. No, I mean, if you want to see what we should do, read the Kerner report. I think it was Lyndon Johnson. I've forgotten who had that commission, but it,
The
it
Kerner
just laid
report.
out what we should do, and it was very good. But we didn't do any of it. On a societal level, you've got to tax the people who are making all the money. The taxes are not equitable, right? They just because something's equal doesn't mean it's equitable. And so if you tax someone where they can't barely buy food and get health care, and someone else might pay
Right.
15,000 times more tax, but maybe that's such a small fraction of what they've made that it's not equitable at all. It doesn't change their lifestyle at all. So the tax structure, that's one of the things that started to change in 73. The tax structure used to be, I think the top rate was like 90%. And you didn't pay 90% unless you were really up there making a lot of money. Now the top rate is, I think I forgot what it is now, but it's really low. And there's so many deductions, right? You can own a piece of real estate, make a lot of money with it, and pay almost no taxes, right? You're going to depreciate that property, accelerated depreciation, a lot of things you can do. So that's number one. I think we got to get the tax structure straightened out. And then I think we've got to, as a society, realize that some things are just required. Healthcare shouldn't be tied to our employment. It should be tied to being alive, right? Healthcare has nothing to do with your employment, right? Just because you got unemployed doesn't mean you can't get sick. So there's that sort of thing going on. Um, yeah, all this. We have to take some things as a given. When I'll date myself, but I went to school went to college in 1970. That was my freshman year. I paid $112.50 for tuition for 1 quarter at the University of California. 1 quarter. Now that's a huge amount of money because they repealed the stuff. That was Reagan, right? So look at Reagan. The It was used to be that college education was heavily subsidized because we saw it as a good thing for our society. Now they don't subsidize it. Now you got to pay for it. So guess what happens? If you don't have much money, you don't go. Now you're stuck in the lower caste or whatever it might be. And if you have a ton of
Mhm.
money, then you do go and you probably end up making more money. It's not the college that makes more money, but it helps you learn how to think. But now it I put four kids through college, and we had to do it with some of it with loans and stuff, and it was really expensive compared to the way it used to be prior to 73. I'm not saying it all changed in 73. That was like the peak of the mountain when we started coming back down.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So it sounds like, and I agree with you. Like our entire system just needs to be thrown out, but it's not. So then, how do you win in a system that's rigged, right? As a financial expert, right? And maybe we close out on this, right? We know the system is rigged. It's not just for black folks, it's rigged for poor people, right? If you don't come from money, like the people who are at the top with a lot of money, large majority of them, come from money, or they have people around them, who gave them money. Like somehow they already had money, right? So we know the system is rigged. And the people at the top, and they're never going to fix it to make it equitable and fair for.
No,
So then you as a financial advisor, a financial wellness person, how do you advise someone, tactical steps they can take to get from, the bottom to, you know, near the top, right?
yeah, I don't try too hard to get people near the top, but I do try to help people that want to get that first foot on the ladder,
Out,
first couple
out of the
steps.
bottom, out of the
Yeah,
bottom. Let's
out of
get
the bottom.
people out of the bottom.
Out of the bottom. Maslow's hierarchy needs, money is a deficiency need. Once you have enough, more is not going to make you that much happier, right? It's a deficiency need. It's like water. Once you have enough
You
water to
sure?
drink, you don't need more. And well, yeah, I mean, you can look at the happiness scale of people, billionaires. They're not any happier than a person who's making, $200,000 a year. They might be a little bit
No,
happier, but they're
I, I,
not.
I agree with I agree with that. I agree with
Yeah,
that. I'm
there's a
just playing.
there's a drop off. More money makes them a little happier,
Yeah.
but not much. So my passion, if you call it that, is to get people in the because I'm not a rocket scientist, right? I know real estate. So my passion is to help people buy that first house. And basically, first I got a big educational thing going on because it's too expensive to buy. And I said, well, if you think it's too expensive to buy, try renting for 10 years. See what what life looks like then. You're left behind. So that's the first thing to get past. And then they say, well, the cash flow is worse. I don't have the cash flow. And yes, that is a big issue to deal with, but there's ways to mitigate that as much as possible. And then to show it's worth it, right? It may be a struggle for the first 5 years or 7 years, but when you're on that elevator, that's the difference between the haves and have nots. Most people in this country right now that are homeowners make more money, keep more money because of that home than their job, right? You can go to work every day, 5 days a week, and you make, let's give them a good salary. Let's say $10,000 a month, right? You're making 10. Well, you're probably paying 2,500 or 3,000 in taxes. So now you got 7, and you're buying your groceries and you're paying your utility bill and you're going out and having some fun once in a while. Maybe you got $500 a month left, right? Maybe that you put $500 a month in your savings account. Okay. But now let's suppose that person's living in a house that's worth $500,000, which is probably commensurate with that salary. Well, if that $500,000 house is going up by just 6% a year, 0.5% a month, that's $25,000 a year, if I'm doing the math right. 25, I'm probably not doing it right, but it's somewhere 30,000. It's probably $30,000 a year, which is $2,500 a month. And you're keeping it because you can't buy a loaf of bread with your equity. So it just builds and builds and builds and compounds, right? So they save $500 from all their work, and they save $2,500 in equity just because they bought the house. It's the only difference. And to me, you talk about what we can do as individuals, help people buy houses. That would be a good start. And maybe vote against these laws that allow corporations to buy 10,000 homes at a time and rent them out. That's killing our society.
Yeah, I mean that's part of our government doesn't really care about us,
No,
tapping
and
into
they
this.
won't. They've
How,
done
how,
lots of studies.
how do right? So how do you fight that when corporations are buying all the houses and here you go, eeny meeny by yourself trying to buy a home.
So here's a concept. Um, Stephen Covey, he wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one of the concepts in there is you have what he calls a circle of concern. All the things you're aware of, the weather, what your neighbor did, all these things you're concerned about. There's a big circle of things that you're aware of and you're concerned with. And then within that circle is a much smaller circle that he calls your circle of influence. Those are the things you can do something about. And the more time you spend in your circle of influence, I can't change the politics, but I might be able to change one person's life by helping them buy a house, right? If I can spend time in my circle of influence, my influence will actually grow, right? If I spend time in my circle of concern, oh, isn't that how horrible all this stuff is going? Well, I didn't do anything about it, right? That's another problem with the racial thing is all the good intentions. Now it's out to the fact that we're not doing anything. So that would be one thing I would say is spend more time in your circle of influence. What can you influence? And it doesn't have to be racial. It could be whatever you do for work, right? Spend more time in getting better at what you do for work rather than, watching 3 hours of horrific news or whatever, or Facebook Reels, right? Those Facebook Reels is like junk food for the mind. It doesn't help you.
Junk food for the mind. Wow, wow. Hey, we could end it on that. This was great conversation, man. A lot of knowledge. Um, very educational for me. Hopefully my audience gets as much out of it as I did. And I feel like we could talk some more. I like these kinds of topics. I like learning more about money. Right, I've been on this journey to learn more about money and making money and saving money for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Like I'm a late bloomer to this. So as the more I have these conversations, the more interested and intrigued I get. So the more I want to talk and learn. So but this was great, Rick. Appreciate you coming on, sharing your knowledge with us. Where can people find you? Are you on social media at all? I know you got a Facebook page, but do you have any other properties on social
I
media?
I think I am, but it's not really me. It's my admin person that does it for me. So, so I think so. But I will say, I'd love it if people want to come join with us. I'm at RenaFi.com. It's like Renaissance Financial, but it's RENAFI, one N. And it's a,
RENAFI.
yeah, RENAFI, like Renaissance
.com.
Financial. I was going to use it for another finance company, but then I went a different direction, kept the name.
Okay.
But yeah, Renaissance, RenaFi.com. And actually, before I got on here, 10 minutes before, I went on and created a coupon. So, because we're like $25 a month, well worth it. Get your money back if you're not happy. But if they just put in Michael, spelled the way you spell it, without the A, if they put in Michael when they're checking out, it'll knock 35% off of whatever tier they choose with us. It's $25 or less per month. And the kind of exciting thing, and not really prepared to explain it as well as I'd like to, but one of my goals I do private coaching, right? And it's like $700 a month, $500 to $700 a month. A lot of people can't afford that. And a lot of people that I really want to work with, because that's the level I like to work with, they can't afford it. I've had to tell people, so, just go pay your credit card for 3 months. And if you do that, come back to me and we'll talk, but keep your $500 and pay the credit card. So I think we're 8 to 12 weeks. I underestimate things sometimes, of creating a program with RenaFi, which for probably a total of 60, including the RenaFi membership, which is going to be part of it because of the groups, will take the place of coaching. It'll be AI driven, not out on the internet driven, but AI driven, trained on my own materials, my coaching methodology document, which is now like 150 pages long. We're going to expand it, but it'll only talk about things that I'm confident work. And so they'll have 8 groups right now, probably 12 overall, that they can come into RenaFi and get direct advice about finances and relationships and anything to do with ADHD and money. They'll be able to do that. And on their phone, 24/7, they'll be able to type in a question. Oh man, I just spent a bunch more money on my credit card. Why did I do that? And the AI will look at our coaching methodology documents and say, well, here's one of them. We can see your file and we can see what the document says. And, here's probably why it happened. And here's 2 or 3 suggestions that may work that are tailored to you. And I'm really hopeful that I'm not trying to change the world, but if we can change the coaching industry in that level for those people, so they don't have to pay $500 to $700 a month, but they can pay $60 a month, or I don't have a price for it yet, but something in that range, it'll be a game changer. Game changer. People need the help, but paying $500 to $700 a month just makes their problem worse, right? They're not ready for that.
Yeah, listen, you that's great to hear, man. That's real, because a lot of people would sell their product. Yeah, it's no biggie. You could put $500 to $700 a month on your credit card, and so I appreciate the honesty. Yeah, sometimes it's hard for a lot of people to pay $500 to $700 a month, as much as they need the education. So a lower priced, similar product, I think, will be helpful. So I will have your information linked on my site as well. We'll talk about it after the show. And the show notes and everything like that. People can access RenaFi.com. But hey, I appreciate you joining once again, Rick. Great conversation. Probably have you back sometime. Maybe learn some more about real estate.
Yeah, I'd love to be back.
But
I think I talked too much, but I'd love to be back. This is the kind of stuff I like to talk about. And way back to the beginning, for people who are trying to figure out how to live their lives better, look for meaning and purpose in your life. Everything else can grow from that. You can make money. You can do something you love. Figure out what means something to you deep down inside. So you have a reason for your existence, your reason to get up out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. Values, personality, and skills overlap is where you want to be.
Exactly.
Great advice.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, man.
Mike.
This was
Thank you, Mike.
Great conversation again. Thanks for listening, everybody, and hanging out for almost 2 hours. I'm going to catch you guys next time. It's Mike, Rick, Sports and the Real Be good. We'll catch you guys next time.
Straight to the top. Just put the stack on the clock. I am Ray Allen's a shot. I'm going straight to the top.